Welcome to Harder Than It Looks, Parking Uncovered, a podcast that illuminates real solutions to common problems within the parking industry. I'm your host, Brian Wolff, CEO of Parker Technology, and in each episode, I'll introduce you to real parking pros that will bring their own tips, tricks, and best practices to manage what we all know is harder than it looks, parking a car. Okay, on the show today, we're going to go a little bit different direction here, and we're not speaking necessarily to a parking person. My guest today is Jeff Siegler, founder of Revitalize or Die. Jeff Siegler is an urbanist, author, and founder of Revitalize or Die, a consulting firm that helps towns get honest about why they're struggling and what to do about it. He's been working in revitalization since 2005, focusing on the connection between place, health, and civic pride. A former Main Street director, a statewide Main Street coordinator, and now an elected commissioner in Pennsylvania, Jeff combines on-the-ground experience with blunt, practical advice for communities that are tired of decline and ready to do the hard work. He's the author of Your City is Sick and speaks regularly across the country on devastating effects of apathy, poor design, and low civic standards. His approach is direct, honest, and always rooted in the belief that our surroundings shape our lives and we deserve better places to live. Jeff, welcome to Harder Than It Looks.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's good to be on the show.
I am super excited to do this segment because I think, well, the way I got to you is one of your LinkedIn posts where I saw one of my colleagues had commented on it, and it was contrary thinking, and I've heard this train of thought before, and so I think digging in and really understanding the role of parking and your perspective on the role of parking in the city revitalization, I think is going to be really interesting for our listeners for sure.
Okay. Well, good. I'm always glad to talk a little trash on whatever subject for sure.
Yeah, that's good. I suspect you're probably used to it, and you've probably been in the fray before. So what I like to do to get things kicked off is I like to hand the mic to my guest and tell you can go back as far as you want to go in your past and just tell us how you got from step to step to step that would bring us up to the present day and shapes your story and who you are. So the mic is yours. Take us back as far as you want to go and just tell us Jeff Siegler's story.
Sure. I grew up in Northwest Ohio in a bit of a struggling Rust Belt town, and didn't necessarily realize it at the time, but I think later it sort of dawned on me that informed a lot of my thinking, or at least became a passionate why I do this. That those communities that flounder or struggle that might not provide people with everything that they need. That's a real tragedy. My parents, and I don't mean to talk trash in the town, but it was the type of place when we graduated, my parents said, you have to leave. That's a terrible thing for a parent to have to do. And so, that affected our family deeply. Like, everybody did move away, and that shouldn't be the way of things. Family should have the opportunity to stay together. And so, that a bit of background. I studied economics in undergrad and never didn't really think much of it at the time. Later went to school for urban planning, but what I've come to find in my career is that sort of economics thinking, like kind of the behavioral economics, has played a huge role, and the combination of how we think about cities, married with how people tend to behave, has really, I think, given me a lot of insight that might separate me from other people in the field. After graduate school, spent 2 years as a Main Street manager in Ohio, then about 10 years running the Ohio Main Street program, and then moved to Pittsburgh in 2016. And through sort of, I guess for misfortune or whatever, had to start, try to set out my own shingle and got into consulting where, just started to post online a lot. There was a lot of topics that I had to steer clear of, and a lot of things that I wanted to say for a long time that I really couldn't in my position. And I was forced to say those if I wanted to, make a dent, if I wanted to have anybody hire me. I was kind of forced to say those things out loud. And And that's been successful. I've been fortunate enough to, I do a lot of writing. And through that, I've been hired to a lot of places to, in essence, it's always like, will you say that here? Will you say what you said? Will you
Yeah.
come in and say those things here? Because we can't. So I'm just hired to say what people locally don't want to say. So it's been really wonderful. I've been fortunate to get to work with communities around the country to try to help them figure out how to go about making their community healthier, stronger, and kind of revitalize their town.
So give us a sense for your sweet spot of size of city and like what are the key indicators that they really need you?
I do tend to work in communities under 100,000. There are occasional exceptions to that, but more often than not, when they don't, when a community doesn't have their own big staff, I think that they tend to seek out more outside help and are a little more willing to acknowledge that other people might have thoughts or ideas. And then usually, they have a downtown that's struggling, kind of a traditional downtown. I don't tend to work in, suburban communities very much. It runs the gamut. Sometimes it's the city, sometimes it's the tourism office, sometimes it's the chamber office, which I always find funny because I'm kind of disparaging about those entities. But usually when they reach out, I understand that like, oh, they're trying to do things different. So
Yeah.
we're going to get along okay.
Yeah. That's awesome. Okay, so you've spent 2 decades in revitalization and helping towns with face tough times about decline. Was it the upbringing, or so you said you went to school for economics and then you went for urban planning? Is
Yeah.
that again the fruit of growing up in that small Rust Belt city?
I don't think so. I don't think either of those really led to my decision to get into this. So maybe it's just a story I like to tell,
Yeah,
connecting it back.
I
But
love it.
yeah, I don't think growing up there had a lot to do with the reason I got into this, but I do think that but I've seen firsthand sort of the cost, the social cost, the sort of societal cost of communities that have declined, that used to be great places that, I think provided with people with everything that they needed. They provided them with the rich social life. They provided them with good work, the opportunity to be entrepreneurial, to live amongst surroundings that were quality, that were beautiful, and that sort of provided them with a rich life and a healthy life. And I don't think many communities do that anymore. And there's a real cost to that. So yeah, I mean, I kind of feel there's a sense of urgency around this that we every day that somebody else gets born into a community that struggles in those ways, like their life is altered substantially.
Yeah. Well, and so you talk a lot about the connection between health of a community and the pride of the people. So give us some sense of sort of the early signs that you look for that a town is either lost or that they've got the spark, like both ends of that spectrum.
It is one of those things where you can, having done this long enough, you can be in a community for like a couple minutes and already sort of know.
Yeah.
It's like walking in a room where you're like something's amiss, or you can kind of pick up. And I don't necessarily know how, but generally, I mean, the things that, you spot, you're going to see a lot of vacancy. You're going to see, empty storefronts, cracked sidewalks, weeds, things like that are a pretty good indicator that they're not healthy. I mean, I look at it this way, like if you saw somebody, it's like when you see somebody in pajamas at the supermarket, you're like, uh-oh, things aren't going well there.
Yeah.
There's a story behind that, but like there's some issues. Something's amiss, and that person might be struggling. And it's kind of the same thing at the municipal level when you see those physical indicators, something.
What's so interesting about that? As soon as you said that, I flash back to you pay attention to any business and you walk into the business, and if the floors are clean and there's flowers and there are a bunch of people walking around, that business is probably pretty healthy. Or even on the outside, it's super clean, right? The opposite is also true. You walk into a business and it's dilapidated. You can get a sense pretty quickly that business is probably not vital, as it were, right?
Right, right. We've kind of taught ourselves to like not judge our appearances, and I think that that's wrong. I think that I understand where it comes from, this idea like, oh, get to know somebody, but we navigate the world through appearances, and that's okay. We shouldn't deny that. And you're right. It's like if a restaurant's not cleaning the floors, like I don't know, I don't want to know what's happening in the kitchen. Kind of like those are pretty good indicators about the person that's behind it. You can tell what local government's like by the condition of the downtown, and you can tell what a business is like by those indicators. And so, yeah, it's not inaccurate. I think it's okay to navigate the world that way, and usually it provides us with a lot of information that's useful.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so when you go into a struggling community, what's usually are there one or two things at the root of it?
What I realized, kind of a big professional epiphany, was that this came from running the Main Street program, and going back to communities over and over and over, and never being able to make any headway, and it kind of banging my head against the wall of like, what's wrong? Why can't we figure this out? What's going on? And it finally dawned on me that we kept bringing these technical solutions, but it was a much more of an emotional problem. Like what a lot of these towns struggled with was a sense of apathy. I was giving them the wrong idea. I was trying to sell them on something very technical, and their problem wasn't technical, it was emotional. Apathy is the lack of care or concern, and residents didn't have any reason to care or be concerned. And that's a really different solution. And I always relate every civic problem to an individual. If a person doesn't want to get out of bed, if you go to them like, here's your manual to run a marathon, like that's useless. We were giving these very technical answers, like get a grant and do a streetscape. And it's like, yeah, but I don't even care about leaving my couch. I'm hopeless almost. Like these towns were really devastated, and rightly so. I don't blame them at all. The buildings had like these great, beautiful, heritage buildings were all falling apart. The sidewalks were cracked. The jobs were gone. The money was gone. Like all the things that if somebody took away your home and car and partner or dog, you'd be pretty blue. And it wouldn't be helpful if somebody came in and it's like, I've got the perfect fitness plan for you, and that's what we were doing. We just kept coming in with these solutions that weren't really speaking to their problems. So realizing that residents had grown apathetic was a real professional epiphany, because that's a different problem, and the right one
Yeah.
to address.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned that, the salesperson, if you can't get through to them, you have to look at yourself. Can you actually break through the apathy? Do you have techniques so not technical techniques, but other techniques to shake people up and sort of wake them up?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, just thinking of the individual, what would we do with a person who was struggling, that was kind of having these personal issues that, maybe didn't feel motivated and was a little down in the dumps. We'd encourage them to like, hey, let's get off the couch and let's go outside. Let's get out for a walk. And to me, that's like, let's pick up trash and plant flowers.
Mm.
Like, let's do the basics. There was it hit me the other day. Somebody had said action is the antidote to anxiety, and I think action is the antidote to apathy as well. It changes your physiology when you're doing stuff, and when you're making progress, like that's the really secret sauce. Like doing something. You don't need to have the world's best fitness plan. You just need to go and move your body, and you don't have to revitalize all at once. But at the moment you're out picking up trash, it's getting better. The moment you're pulling weeds, you're actually making it better. And so I think that the real fundamentals are like, start small, start with the littlest thing that you can do. Maybe it's your front yard, maybe it's your block, but you'll never tackle the big stuff if you don't just get out and do the little stuff. So, and aesthetics, I mean, that's the easiest place to start. It's the most visible thing. And the moment you see, the moment you make something nicer in your home, you notice it and you feel good about it. It's like when you buy a new sweater or get a haircut, like it kind of changes you a little bit, and it lifts your day, and that matters. That's a momentum thing.
Yep, no doubt about it. In fact, there's real science behind it. I've actually written articles and read articles about the fact that even small incremental change, as long as you can get some momentum, the whole idea is around momentum, and you got to take one step to, obviously the longest journey starts with the first step. That makes perfect sense. So do the easy stuff, pick up the trash, pull the weeds, plant flowers, and get some momentum. Talk about the role of leadership in your journey to break the apathy as well. I have to believe that there's some city leadership or even civic leadership that matters in that equation as well.
It does. Absolutely. Like this stuff is a heck of a lot easier if you're municipal executives and your council is on board and gets it, it's tough to fight through when those individuals don't sort of see the bigger picture, or when they're, sometimes even fighting against the community, or think what they know what's best. And that can lead to a lot of difficulty. But, how one of the things I like always want to tell, those in positions of leadership, like, raise standards. You have to raise your standards. And that's at every level. You need to ask more of your municipal staff. You need to ask more of residents. You need to ask more of property owners and business owners. Like, standards are how we define our lives. Those are the guardrails. And we've had like 30 and 40 years of trying to lower those. Like, let's make it easy for everybody. Like, no. People don't want easy. They want better. Like, Harvard's not missing out on applicants this year. We aspire to more. And when you lower standards, you give people a pass to kind of to be less. I mean, that's the recipe for apathy. So it's like, raise standards wherever you can for your committees, for your board members, for residents, that's going to give people satisfaction and like ultimately help frame up. Like, I mean, property is the huge one.
Yeah.
You can't let these properties downtown just sit there and decay. That costs taxpayers a ton of money. Crime, vagrancy, mental health issues. Like, put rules in place that's okay. And in fact, it's incumbent upon you to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so I should stop, take a step back here, because I had to look this up. So there may be others listening to this who don't know what a Main Street director does. So maybe you could tell us about those two jobs. You said you were a Main Street director, and then you were also like the director of Main Street programs, it sounded like. So tell us a little bit about that job, and obviously how it shapes your thinking now.
Yeah. Yes. Sorry, I shouldn't have assumed. So there's, it'd be like being the director of a bid, or, a commercial corridor, or, it's a national organization that has a lot of, a lot of communities throughout the country. But in essence, that's a Main Street program is a downtown revitalization program.
Okay.
So in Ohio, there at the time, there was about 30, these county seat type communities that had in a local nonprofit that was trying to revitalize the commercial corridor. And then I kind of helped coordinate that at the state level to make sure that they had as much of the resources that they needed.
Okay. And so a bit like, are you familiar with like Keep America Beautiful? Is that a similar kind? Probably
Yeah,
not doing the
similar
same
and
thing, but
similar in nature. Yes.
yeah. Okay. That makes sense to me. All right. But then you are an elected official in Pennsylvania. You're an elected commissioner. What do you do in that role?
Yeah, so that's something I kind of forced myself to do. Didn't necessarily want to be involved in politics, but I felt that I had somewhat of an obligation to do this kind of work at home and give back a little bit in my community here. We abut Pittsburgh proper, my municipality, and so there's 5 of us that set policy and try to provide some direction to the municipality. We're a municipality of about 36,000, about 6 square miles, so kind of a dense little community here.
Yeah. Great. Okay. All right. So let's we may end up coming back to the cities and all of that, but let's talk about parking. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you've said one of the biggest challenges in revitalization is getting people to stop obsessing over parking. So tell us more about your philosophy that way, and why do you think so many communities are fixated on parking?
It is definitely a frustration. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to restore the health to, the heart of a community. And half the conversations are around this one subject. And it is extremely frustrating because it's not the right conversation to have. I don't believe that. I always come back, like, I think about parking now. Just cars in general is kind of like this, who I think it was Einstein that said, we can't simultaneously prevent and prepare for war. And I'm kind of a believer that we can't build for cars and people. You sort of need to pick, because the more space that we give over to cars, the less hospitable we are to people. Those things are kind of at odds. And I understand that people ride in cars, but so I think that we have spent too much time in a lot of communities trying to figure out how to accommodate cars, tearing down great buildings, tearing down literally the attractions that people would come to a community for, so we can so we can store cars. And that's some, the way I thought of it once is like, that's like removing the stage to add more seating.
Yeah.
No one's coming like,
Well, in fact, now that you're saying these things, I think it was your post. What you said in the post that I read that started it all was, you're like, listen, it is not the parking that's attracting these people. If you put on a good show or if you have a great restaurant, they will figure out how to get there. And in fact, if there's no parking, they may actually walk, take a bike, take the bus. They will get there. And that really resonated with me because, you know, uh, parking sends, well, as you know, parking, the podcast is harder than it looks, right? And parking is not exactly loved, right? We're
yeah,
not loved. And everybody says there's not enough parking and all of this. And in the end, I think I subscribe to what you do. And that is, you got to create a reason for somebody to go because people are not going to park. They're going to go somewhere else. And so
right,
it is that idea, I think,
right.
that lifts us all, frankly.
You could have the greatest collection of parking in the world.
Right.
I don't know that anybody's come to see it yet simultaneously. And as you brought up, the great districts in our country don't have adequate parking. The French Quarter, I've walked all around it, and there might be one parking garage attached to a hotel, but I think that's it. But they still are doing business, and one of our one of our busiest neighborhoods in Pittsburgh, Lawrenceville, there's not adequate parking there, yet people find a way to get there. And it just goes to show you, like, the attraction is more important than the utility of stores. Like, great restaurants don't struggle with parking. Bad ones do. Great retailers don't. Great, like, it is. If there's something worth going to, people will find a way to get there. And if there's nothing worth going to, people will cite parking as the reason. That has become our de facto. And you can see it over and over again. Like, boy, the bad business owners are real quick to say, like, look, it's not the fact that I'm only open 7 hours a week, haven't washed my windows, and I'm selling VCRs. It's parking is what's really holding me back.
That's hysterical. All right. So how do you snap them out? Do you actually have stories about convincing people that lack of parking isn't the problem?
Couple things, one of my favorite ways is like, oh, tell me about your big event in town. They'll explain, oh, the Christmas parade. Yeah, we had 10,000 people here. Like, huh. All right. Where did they all park? How did that ever work? And like, oh, then it starts to dawn on them. And then you start to talk about the costs. I mean, the idea of building a parking deck. I mean, what are these things? I mean, you'd know better than I would, like 35,000 a space at this point. Like, it's pretty pricey.
Yeah. Yep.
And for all the accommodations they've made towards parking in the past, like, hey, have any of these helped? Did any of these make a difference? And there'll be instances of management, that help. But generally, when it's adding more, when they tell me that they added more, I don't, usually there's not like, oh, that completely changed everything. So that's where I try to kind of get into the behavioral economics of it. It's like, oh, where do you like to visit? Well, why? You know, because you want to not be in your car for a few days. So sometimes those things get through, but not always.
Yeah. Well, I think in a lot of ways, the other reason that I wanted you to come on the show is I think we're on the same side. So there will be a parking person that will hear you say that, make it sound like you're hostile to parking. You're actually not hostile to parking. You are, because we suffer the same fate, frankly, on the parking side. We people are hostile to us because we don't have enough parking, or the parking is in the wrong place, right? There's a study that says that if you don't have parking within 300 feet, a person won't walk more than 300 feet from where they parked, or that is their ultimate desired, and 300 is the max. And, I talk to parking professionals all the time, and they say, we have lots of parking. It's just not in the right place
Right.
because a fellow Pittsburgh director of parking at UPMC once he coined the phrase that people want to park under their desk, right? And they have, there's plenty of parking. It's just not where people want to park. So I think we're on the same side. The real question is, how do we get these folks to listen to the logic of it's the attraction, stupid?
Yeah, I always see someone. It's like, nobody expects to park in the home goods aisle at Target. Like, it's there's a weird mentality, but that's an attraction. People will show up for that, to where a downtown that's empty. isn't enough attraction. It's in essence because they've added too much parking and let the car play too big of a role that they've lost the thing that once was attractive. But, again, Manhattan, like, it is not an easy place to park, and people walk a lot there
Yeah.
because there's so much to see and there's so much to do, and that's why we travel. So yeah, I try to use the economics of it, honestly, that if you're going to accommodate parking, you're going to spend a lot of money and receive very little revenue in return. Like, you're probably being you're probably being fiscally irresponsible with taxpayer money. I would much rather see you use that to foster real estate development, to put facade grants in to help small business owners, clean up the sidewalks. These are going to have a real return. When you do that, you're going to see, property values go up, retail sales go up. You're going to increase the tax. Like, parking won't increase your tax base. Parking won't. That is mismanaging taxpayer money. So, you only have so much money to spend.
Yeah.
Think wisely about where you're going to get a return.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So I think the answer you just gave is a partial answer to this, but what's the right way for a city to think about parking?
That it's a utility. I think of it as a utility, and people aren't drawn to the utility, but simultaneously we need to consider it. We need to think about it, and there's a time and a place for it, but it should accommodate what sort of people want to do. You want to create the draw first and then think about parking later, but it shouldn't. There are other ways to get around to. I just ask that they think reasonably about how to maximize this utility and not think of it as what's going to be the solution.
Yeah. And so, again, I think one of your other posts talks about the car as the enemy. I have to tell you that one of the guys that spends a lot of time in parking, he's got a graph. And from 1950, and maybe even before that till now, he's got a graph that has this steady 2 to 3% increase in cars, in the number of cars or number of miles traveled, right? We are not going to solve an American love for cars anytime soon. So is there a happy medium? Is there space in between? What's your advice to a city who has to cope with owners of cars who want to be in their cars?
I look at it this way. I've got no problem with car ownership. What I find real fault with is cities that build places that require car ownership to survive. And that's how we've built for, 50 to 60 years, that you have to own a $1,000 machine to eat, to get to work. That was a tragedy, and that needs to be corrected. Like, it is fine that if people want to live that way, but you should also build an alternative. There should be places where people can survive and exist there. They don't have to own a car, or at least you don't have to own two cars. That walkability matters, and that's going to be where your community is healthiest. It's going to be the center of your town. That's going to be where local businesses are located. Like, if you don't have a healthy heart, which is always going to be that less of a car place, your whole community is going to struggle. So, I'm not going to argue away all of suburbia. I don't think it's great for towns. I think it's really, there's a million arguments about why that's really bad for your local economy, but I'm never, people are pretty sold on that. But man, what if there was a place in town where at least you could go to walk around, pop in some local businesses and have a decent social experience, like feel happy and healthy, and like that place where you travel to go, like what if you had that in your own town that you could visit occasionally? That might be nice.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So the concept of new urbanism, how does that fit into the work that you're doing? I have to imagine that that's a good thing from your perspective. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. The idea is new urbanism is kind of like old urbanism. It's, let's build. What if new construction kind of adapted some of the principles that we held from, it's funny because like I do find that I love the idea. New urbanism is great. It's all extremely important. But this idea that it's new is sort of funny, and that's an argument I always have in these communities where I go to. They're like, well, I don't know about this new walkability stuff and this. And it's like, well, your great grandfather and his grandfather, and the like, this idea of having a traditional commercial district of walkable places, of non-car places, actually is extremely old.
Right.
For thousands of years we've built in this way, and it's only been a 50-year blip or 70-year blip where we've fundamentally changed how we get around and how we build. So yeah, new urbanism is great. More architects and developers and planners thinking about how do we build walking back into our lives and social places and beauty and these things that we know is so intrinsic to our well-being and health. It's really it's great to see it catching on and more and more. There was just a community, I think it's called Cul-de-sac out in Tempe, Arizona. It's a car-free community that sold out before construction was complete. Like in Arizona, if not, that's
Yeah,
wild.
that's great. Well, and I so the piece about new urbanism, it's funny, right? Right. What's old is new again. Then
Hmm.
they probably called it new urbanism because sprawl took over, and then they tried to sort of recapture the city cores again. I just love, so whenever my family and I travel, we try it. We've been to all but 3 of the ballparks in the United States.
Awesome.
And the one thing that my one goal as I plan a trip is to park my car once and then never touch it till the end of the trip, right? Metro, rail, walk, right? I don't want to drive in a city. I want to just get to I want to get to the place a different way so that I don't have to worry about having to park and all of those things. And I know that's ironic because I'm in parking. But I love the idea of just being able to walk to things. Like you
and
can get to the grocery store, you can get to the bar, you can get to the flower shop or whatever it is. That attracts, that appeals to me.
and you're not alone in that. That's everybody. That is absolutely everybody. I don't, I'll be in places sometimes where like, oh, well, we don't like to walk here. Like, you be quiet. Like, you have not somehow evolved differently from the rest of the world. Like, everybody enjoys walking. It's part of our DNA. It's part of our makeup that, it feels good. It's healthy. It feels good. It triggers our brain. It stimulates our emotions. It gives off endorphins. Like, everybody enjoys walking. It just, if live in an area where it's really dangerous or it's really hard to do, you're not going to. But it doesn't mean you enjoy walking. You're just conditioned by your surroundings, and you don't get to experience it. So there's a reason why the places that we love are the most popular. There's a reason why, everybody likes Manhattan or the French Quarter because you can walk. There's a reason why Seaside down in Florida, like it's first time I visited, I wanted to hate it because it's like, oh, this is just for rich people. It's like, well, it's actually awesome, and it's just because there's so few nice places, rich people bought it up. Like, that's not its fault. Like, good
Yeah.
design is to blame. It's a shame that there are so few great places where you can have this walkable lifestyle, and because of that, they're expensive.
So tell us a story about a town that you turned around. Tell us your best success story around. They started out at -10 and you turned them into at least a 5 or 7, or maybe you got to them at 10. But tell us a story.
Oh, I can't do that. I don't know how to answer that well. I think it's a long time. I think these things take a long time, and I don't know that there's what my goal when I go into a community, and I always try to say this is that, I hope to leave you with a better decision making prism. I hope that when I go, I'm not going to give you a list of 50 things that you need to do. I hope that when you make decisions, you think about, you know, will this make the community more self-reliant, more resilient, prouder? So, and I don't think that communities really, I mean, I've certainly seen signs of improvement, but I would never be so bold as to say like, oh, I turned this place around. And that takes ages. And so I've seen communities get better and make better choices and make the right strides, but I can't take credit for any community, you know, changing its whole trajectory.
Well, I love the humility. And maybe at the end, then what I'm hearing you say is, of course, it's a decades long process.
Yes.
They didn't get there overnight, and it will take them more than overnight to get out. But perhaps they pulled you in to plant seeds, the seeds of change, if you will.
That is the hope. That is ultimately what drives me. I think that passionate people in every town get involved because they see things aren't as they should be and they want to make a difference. And my heart goes out to them because I think they get a lot of bad advice. Somebody
Right.
puts all their time and effort into running for mayor, running for council, or getting on the chamber board or this or that. And then they get there and then they're told, well, just do tourism and economic development. You'll get better. Just get just do a comp plan and things will get better. And it's like that doesn't work. Those might have a role, but that's not the solution. And those can be really expensive. sometimes they even make things worse. If you spend a bunch of money on this thing you were promised would make you better, it's like, once I get those diet pills, this is going to be fixed. You're a little dejected after you spend all that money on your diet pills, and they didn't do anything. I think there's a lot of diet pills out there. Like, of course it's nice to think. Of course it's nice to think that this one thing will fix it. But that doesn't, diet pills don't work for a reason. Like, at the end of the day, you just have to do a bunch of hard work. And that's up to the community. I mean, it's the same as like, you can have a great personal trainer, but at the end of the day, you're the one that has to show up, and nobody can force you to put in effort. Nobody can force you to make progress. And therefore, nobody can instill pride from outside. Like, the only way, self-improvement always has to be internal. It can never be external. And that is the message I try to get through to communities. Like, you can win HGTV's grant year after year, but like, until you go do the work yourself, it's not going to make your community proud. And that's ultimately, like, that's where self-esteem comes from.
Yeah, I love it. Pride comes from internal. That is so true. Businesses, obviously, you've seen it in cities, but it personally, it makes perfect sense. Okay, one question that I didn't ask you about from a parking perspective is, from a design standpoint, what does good planning look like for parking in a city?
I think it shouldn't be very visible. Parking is not attractive, and we're drawn to attractive places. And that is a very, I think, a pretty obvious statement, but it's funny how often we don't give that credit. Like, people are drawn to beautiful places. A beautiful place is going to outperform every time.
Mm.
Flowers, quality materials, human scale. We are drawn to those places, and we'll spend all our money in those places. And parking is an attractive thing. So I think it should be hidden a bit. It needs to be minimized, because if places that are full of parking are not where we're drawn to, and I think it'll hinder business. So that way, just understanding that the utility of parking is not our most attractive feature, and it should probably be minimized whenever possible.
Man, and I just think about that. It's what an oxymoronic statement that is, because uh, if you were to ask John Q. Public, at least initially, they would say, I want to be able to find parking easily. And so if
Yeah,
you hide it, how do you find it? Right. And
yeah,
I totally get it. I mean, I could
that's
think of,
funny.
yeah, I can think of several places in Miami here, even in Indianapolis, in Carmel. I can only think of one. Maybe there are a couple of parking decks in Carmel, but they're on secondary streets. They're sort of back off, and Carmel has done an awesome job of just creating Main Street with really vibrant spaces. And the parking is really quite invisible, except for street parking right in front of the stores. So I think that feels right. It's just that if you were to
That's
ask the guy,
You're
he'd
right. You
say,
bring up a good point. And then I think that sometimes that is the challenge in this, is like, what the individual wants and what's best might not always be the same thing. What's convenient for the individual isn't necessarily best for the community. And sometimes I see that, like, oh yeah, a business owner might want parking, a million parking spaces surrounding them, but that's not good for the district. And we have to think about, I think in this work, we have to think about what's great for the district as a whole, because that's going to be more important for the individual businesses. But if we only take the advice of the individual businesses, it won't always be great for the whole.
yeah, no question. In fact, there are many parking professionals that have been battered and bruised, along with city parking leaders who have put paid parking, metered parking in place, much to the chagrin of the business owners. And lo and behold, it works, because the people parking in those free spots are working in your businesses, and those cars never turn. And if you want those places to turn, you gotta give people a time limit and get them out of there.
Yeah, I love, yes, I think about it that way. I think about it as if you were a restaurateur, what you would want is your tables to turn over. First off, you need to, if your food sucks and your service is bad, no one's coming in, your parking doesn't matter. Or your tables don't matter, your chairs don't matter. But if you have great stuff, like, you're going to do better when those tables turn over. That's kind of obvious. Like, adding, if your business is down, adding a 50 more tables is not going to increase business. But again, that's kind of this solution that we come to in a lot of this work, is like, well, we just need to add more. So, right. Yes, you do want it to turn over. You do want to charge appropriately for it. Like, we we should use this commodity or this utility in a way that, um, it yeah, that fosters more business. Like it can play a really pivotal role in increasing sales.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so in your consulting work, what separates the communities that actually make progress from the ones that stay stuck in old habits?
I think just a willingness to not like having a few leaders that are willing to say change is okay. Hey, we maybe the way we've been doing things isn't working. I really do think it's just a matter of a couple people willing to break from tradition and say like this like let's open our eyes and see that things aren't going as good as we thought. We keep maybe we keep telling our story that this place is great. Like, is it? It might not be, and that's okay. It's okay to, if you're not doing well, like, we're better off when we admit our problems. And I think it's usually a case where a city leader or two or some community leaders are finally willing to say, like, this isn't going well and let's do something about it. Like, we probably should visit somebody and talk about,
Yeah.
we might need to go to the doctor.
Yeah. And pull some weeds and raise the standards. That raise the standards will resonate with me for a long time because it's I believe it. Okay, so last question before we get to the lightning round here. So looking ahead, is there anything that gives you hope about where towns and cities are headed and in your revitalization work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's less of a love affair with the car with some younger people.
Mm,
I think that their quality of life is playing a larger role. And I see more and more, I'm seeing people move back to their like smaller hometowns that they're kind of maybe a little that they're tired, of the big city that they moved to and want to be able to move home and make a difference. So I'm seeing more and more like mayors that once were lived in a bigger city, moved back home to get involved. And then I think what really gives me hope, and we're not there yet, but I think this at some point, people are going to figure out how much their surroundings play a role in their health. Like we're more health conscious than ever here, but we've yet to make that leap that like, oh, where I live plays a huge role. We understand that like working out matters, what we eat matters, etc. We're about to figure out that like where you live matters way more than those other things. And I think when that becomes a more popular concept, that things will continue to get much better.
okay, so maybe we should have dug into that just a little bit more because I could see the passion for you. What do you know that we don't as it relates to where we live matters to your health?
Literally, the place in which you live is more important than your genetics in terms of your health. It will have a bigger impact on your mental health, social health, physical health, fiscal health. Like all those things are so entwined in your place. Whether you walk, whether you're stressed out, whether you have friends, whether you are. We've all been to an experience where we walk in someplace and we're like, oh, I love it here. Lobby, this hotel lobby or this restaurant makes me feel amazing. Like you are literally experiencing better health course through your body from being in surroundings that are suitable to you. And we've all had a time where like, I don't like it here. It feels dangerous. It feels shady. I want to get out. Again, same thing. Your brain is recognizing like something's amiss here and I don't want to be here. It plays such a pivotal role in almost every aspect of our health. Because right, we make decisions based on our surroundings.
Yeah.
We don't. I kind of think of it this way: like we don't just travel to like stare at pretty places. We actually travel to feel pretty, if you will. Like,
Yeah.
it's like it's not about like it's nice to look at this nice thing. It's like no, no, no. I feel really nice here. We all pay a premium to feel nice, whether that's sitting in a nicer car or a nicer restaurant or a nicer home or a nicer hotel. And that translates to the block and the downtown and the community as a whole. There's a reason you pay more because it feels good, and feeling good is health.
Yeah. Awesome. I like that a lot. Okay, so what haven't I asked you that I should have asked you?
Nothing comes to mind. I think that we've covered a lot of ground. I think you've nailed it.
Well, I appreciate that. Okay, so this will be the fun part. These are 6 questions that I ask all of my guests. You got a sneak preview on the first one because
Okay.
as Courtney will say, sometimes we stump our guests. So the first question is, what phrase are you known for?
When I started in this, give a damn was one that really, I kind of used a lot. That was much a kind of part of the writing a lot and how I might sign a book occasionally. Yeah, this idea of give a damn that is, care and concern that what we should be doing is giving a lot more damns about everything. Yes, I think that kind of became one. And no, I didn't come up with it. I just saw it somewhere and loved it and started using it a lot.
Yeah, and then you coined it as your own. Trust me, all of mine are recycled. Most of mine are recycled for sure. All right. So then question 2 is, what's the hardest thing you've ever done in life?
Boy, that's okay. The hardest thing I've ever done in life. Let's see.
Uh,
I'd say outside of more personal issues, one of the hardest things back in the spring, a friend and I did a gravel ride, a gravel bike ride, and it was like 38 degrees and pouring rain and incredibly muddy. Like it was one of the most physically taxing things I've ever. I mean, it was physically and mentally taxing. Like it really just to get to the end, what took about everything we had. It was just so miserable, and at some point you're shivering, and to get through that was one of the toughest.
so a gravel ride, is that just off trail or is it literally gravel?
Yeah, it's a bike ride that is more right trail. I mean, it's some of it's gravel, some of it's mud. On this day, it all had turned into mud.
Was all mud.
Um, so yeah, yeah, it's more trail, more
Yeah.
of a trail ride, but not mountain biking either.
Okay. All right. That was hard. All right. So what's the hardest thing about your consulting job? Or what's the hardest thing about your job?
The hardest thing about my job, public speaking.
Oh.
I mean, it's nerve wracking every time. I do it all the time, but I don't think there'll ever be a moment where there isn't some nerves around it. And I think that as it should be, it's important, it matters, and it will never not be odd standing in front of hundreds of people, just talking by yourself for an hour.
Yeah.
So yeah, that part is always a challenge, and I expect will always remain one.
And so how do you overcome it?
Just do it. I
Just
mean,
do
there
it.
isn't really any other way. You just have to kind of steel your nerves and take deep breaths before you go up. And once you get up there, it gets more comfortable. But yeah, it's an odd experience.
Yeah, you get those first couple head nods and then you've got a little momentum in the
Yeah.
crowd, right?
Yes.
They
But yeah,
contact you 1 or 2 believers.
every time it starts, it is a strange experience.
I'm with you 100%. Okay. So if you could wave your magic wand and fix, let's start. I'm going to ask it 2 times for you. The first one is, if you could wave your magic wand and fix one thing in revitalization, in your work in urban revitalization, what would it be?
Vacancy. Easy one is vacancy.
Okay.
Vacant buildings are absolutely devastating to a community. They foster crime, vagrancy, reduce the tax base. I think make people much more apathetic. They cost the municipality, I mean, millions of dollars. I think vacancy is just the easiest thing to point to. Like if you fix that one thing, everything else would get a lot better.
That's good. That's really good. That was crisp. Okay. Now I'm going to ask you the parking question. So if you could wave your magic wand from your perspective and fix anything about parking, what would it be?
That city leaders took a return of investment approach with it. That it wasn't just listening to property owners or business owners, but instead thought about what does this look like from a taxpayer's perspective? If we put X amount of dollars into parking, is that something that we're going to get back? I think if there was a little more, uh, if they thought more, yeah, fiscally about this and a return on
Yeah.
investment, I think that there might be less investment in parking.
Interesting. All right. So when you're not parking cars, what do you do for fun?
I like to read, ride my bike. I like to go see some baseball games, and unfortunately, I'm a Pirates fan, so there's a lot of misery in that. Yeah, walk my dog, hang out with the kids.
Yeah. So I have to tell you that PNC is very high on our list. It is a gorgeous ballpark, super affordable, and stunning views. So you sit behind home plate and you're entertained all night, whether it's a good baseball or not.
You don't go there for good baseball. You go there to see the skyline go from day to night. I mean, I do love the Pirates, but I love that park, and it is and I can take the train down there. I don't have to drive. I don't have to park. I can have a very affordable experience, and also until you start buying $15 beers, that part gets a little rough. But
No,
yeah, I love it there. It's an important part of the city to me.
that's awesome. Okay. Last question. What are you most proud of?
My children for sure. Yeah, they are well-adjusted, good people. So I'm pretty pleased about that. And in this day and age, I'm well-adjusted, nice, kind people that I think are really happy. So that
Yeah.
is what I am most proud of.
Okay. So I usually give people the children or their families as the default. Have you got
Okay.
something else that you're really proud of?
I'm very proud of my career. I am very proud that I get to do work that I believe impacts people's lives. I'm such a big, I'm such a firm believer that the places we live have such a tremendous impact on our health and well-being. And I feel an immense amount of pride to get to do that, to have written a book in this area, to get to speak on it, to try to help people in this way that I think has a big impact on their lives. I'm extremely fortunate to get to do that and proud that I've managed to.
Yeah. So I've got a good friend whose wife is a nutritionist, and she's always looking at the newest trends. And so she's spotted the impact of light on people's health. I think where they live might be right behind the light. So I have hope that the work that you're doing will eventually find the light of day, no pun intended, and that people will appreciate that where they live and the ability to revitalize their cities will truly impact their health in ways that they don't realize today.
Well, we'll get there. I mean, think about, food. Nobody up until the 90s who cared about food, who thought about food systems and ingredients and, considered whether or not smoking or 20 Coca-Colas had a negative impact on our lives and our health. And now, that is a central tenet to, we think about it all the time. We're obsessed with it. And so its day is coming.
You're on the tip of the spear.
Hopefully.
All right. So if somebody wants to get a hold of you, how can they get a hold of you?
Pretty easy. Revitalizerdie.com is the website. If you search Revitalizer Die, I'm kind of the only one that comes up. So, I post daily on Facebook and LinkedIn and I have a million blog posts available on the website. So, and City is Sick, you can find on my website as well if anybody wants a copy of that. So,
Okay. And you'll speak and you actually do consulting as well. Are those the two primary things?
yeah, I do a lot of public speaking, but I also do a lot of hands-on consulting. I go to communities and do what I call a civic assessment, walk around town, meet with all the stakeholders and try to help them understand what's missing, what needs to be done, what kind of policies need to be in place, and how do we get the public sector, private sector, nonprofit sector working together to make this a place where more people can feel healthy and happy.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, Jeff, we could go on all day, but both of us have day jobs. So I wanted to tell you how much I've enjoyed the conversation. I enjoyed it more than I even anticipated that I would. I'm glad that we finally got together on the podcast. Thank you for your time. And I appreciate all the work that you do, because even though there may be parking people that think you're standing against us, I still believe that we're in a lot of ways, we're in the same spot. We're pulling the wagon in the same direction. It's just we're probably trying to get there a couple of different ways.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's been great.
That's a wrap on this episode of Harder Than It Looks, Parking Uncovered, presented by Parker Technology. Please leave us a review if you liked what you heard. Make sure you tune in next month as we continue to uncover tips, tricks, and best practices to manage what we all know is harder than it looks: parking a car. Bye for now.